Namaste, Jai Hind, and welcome to yet another conversation here where we try to get the right perspective. And with this is technology of the future, jobs of the future, platforms of the future, and how perhaps the construct of our own lives will be in the future. And one of those buzzwords these days is artificial intelligence or AI. Now, is AI going to make us more intelligent? Is this intelligence artificial, or is it just going to make us a little more stupid? And that is the only original thing that remains about humanity. Is a lot to comprehend. But the person who's sitting across to have this conversation is the former CEO of Prasar Bharati, and right now he's the co-founder of a DeepTech Bharat, that is AI4India.org. Shashi Shekhar Vempati ji, namaste.
Namaste. Thank you
So,
for having me.
so what is your first understanding about this whole thing called AI? Is it a disruptor? Is it something which is constructive? Or is it just going to make intelligence more artificial and human beings more stupid?
Well, I think you framed it very nicely because there's so much talk of AI. We forget that sometimes it's actually the natural stupidity that comes to our rescue. But going back to your question, right? We've seen different waves of technology, right? I remember when I first started working in '95. You still went to an office where there were a bunch of files, paper. There was no digital interface, no computer, right? And there was one computer which the entire department would share, right? Going from that with the internet, the e-commerce, then the mobile data, smartphones, to now with AI, we've seen these different waves of technology. What is different, very fundamentally different, unlike the previous waves of technological evolution in AI, is that AI is growing at an exponential rate. It is evolving at an exponential rate. And today AI is being used to make AI better, right? So because you have now the ability to design chips using AI tools. So which means that the chips that are running AI are getting designed using AI. So that cycle has become so shorter, right? Just in the last 18 months, I mean, the number of releases that you've had and the kind of new tools and new interfaces that have emerged. So the pace of evolution is very, very fast. And I think that is where the big difference is. However, I think there is a debate whether this is the right path, there's the right way to go, is this sustainable? So all those are very valid questions, but there's no denying the reality that the AI shift is a fundamentally different shift compared to every other previous technological shift that we've seen.
But when something that is mutating, let's say, or evolving so fast, how does one have a policy framework for this?
That is, I think, $1 million question, right? Because if you look at India, unlike many other countries, our challenge has always been that the consumer is way ahead of the policymaker, right, in adopting new technologies.
Yeah.
Be it with the internet, be it with gaming, be it with smartphones, instant messaging, social media, and then of course now with ChatGPT and Perplexity and all the other AI tools that have emerged. So for policies and policymakers and the regulators to keep up is going to be very, very challenging. And in the AI era, it is going to be even more challenging because we have a wide gap between state capacity, the maturity of our systems, and our ability of our policymakers to keep up with these trends versus where the technology is. And I think that's a struggle every country is going through. And then in our case, it's a little more acute because we have this dichotomy where the consumer adoption is way ahead of policy catching up with it.
True. So then where does AI4India.org fit in here? And when you say Deep Tech Bharat, what's the thought process there?
So let me set a bit of background and context to this. So in fact, even before I became the CEO of Prasar Bharati, it was back in 2016. At that time, Carnegie India had just been set up, and they wanted a thought paper to be written on what should India be doing with respect to AI. This is 2016, even before ChatGPT or any of this stuff happened. At that time, it was very interesting because I started researching this to write that white paper. China had a very interesting phenomenon going on. So they had this large talent pool of Chinese diaspora out of Silicon Valley, who went back to China and started helping their big tech platforms to build AI capabilities. A lot of the search engines like Baidu, Tencent, WeChat, many of them had started working on AI way back in 2016 itself. right? And so there was a big gap there in terms of while we are the talent powerhouse, most of Silicon Valley is people of Indian origin. We didn't see a similar phenomenon. So one aspect of that paper was, what should India's strategy be? What should we prioritize on in terms of making data available or building models and so on? This is still early stages of where AI was. Then of course we had this whole period in between. COVID happened. The inflection point has really been the compute powers coming down. I mean, the cost of compute power coming down. You have chips which are now, for example, these 2 nanometer, 3 nanometer chips which pack a large number of transistors, can do very complex calculations in a short period of time. Cloud computing capacity going up, so you don't have to build all that in one place. You can have it anywhere, right? So these things made it possible for these new models to emerge. And then, of course, what has happened with generative AI and OpenAI. So around 2022, when ChatGPT just came out, there were a whole bunch of Indian startups who were struggling with even basic access to high power, high performance computing, right? And what we discovered is that if you are trying to build AI in India for Indian use cases in the Indian context, the challenges and the barriers were quite significant, and each of these smaller startups was trying to figure it out themselves. So the genesis of AI for India was basically to bring everyone together. So that we can find common solutions to these problems and bring certain things which require policy intervention to the attention of the policymakers. So that was the genesis of how AI for India came about. And then since then, of course, the landscape has changed so fast, where these platforms adoption has moved very quickly. Now, of course, there's an India AI mission, and there's a whole bunch of things that the government is doing to help the startups. So now the challenges are a little different. It's no longer about compute. Now it is about access to data, access to the models. And then, of course, how do we bring together an ecosystem if our models have to compete, toe-to-toe or head-to-head with, the leading models of the West, or even from China, for example.
What is the Prime Minister's vision on this, and what is the government's thought process on generative AI, open AI? What's your understanding? Is there any thought process, is there any vision of how this can constructively help Bharat?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, if you look at the Prime Minister's entire political career, he's been someone who's never been shy of experimenting with technology. Right? He was the first to take to social media. He was the first to do live streaming of his speeches on YouTube. And then in the 2024 elections, he was the first one to start using AI for translating his speeches. If I rewind back a bit, a lot of the early work on building Indian language models, interestingly, was based on Man Ki Baat, because Man Ki Baat corpus is a very high fidelity corpus, right? The Prime Minister talks in Hindi, it gets transcribed, then that transcript, official transcript, gets translated to 23 languages. So you have a body of language text which is very reliable, very accurate, because it has gone through that process. So a lot of the initial machine translation models work at IIT Hyderabad or IIT Kanpur was actually using the Man Ki Baat corpus. And because Man Ki Baat was being done in not just the main languages, but also in these dialects like Gojri, Dogri, and so on, when there were national security needs in those regions, this corpus was used to train the algorithms to be able to, be able to communicate in those local dialects, and which don't have a big, huge digital footprint, right? So a lot of the thinking and the thought process of the Prime Minister was already happening in this direction. I think the most clear perspective on where he sees this technology comes from, I think, two things. One was his interaction with Bill Gates, where you see a lot of clarity. Second was his speech at the Paris AI Summit, where he made clear that, while there is a divergence in the way Europe is looking at AI, the way US is looking at AI, what China is trying to do, but unless India is part of the equation, AI is not going to happen. So India has to be part of, whatever global trajectory AI takes. And even though there was no consensus at that Paris summit, clearly it was the perspective, the middle path that the Prime Minister advocated, where we balance both innovation with the regulatory imperatives, I think was very well appreciated. And that's probably where most of the world will go towards.
Yeah, but we also see now technology getting ahead of us. Now, I have got nothing against these platforms, but are these platforms enabling, or are they making or taking away the propensity to think from the person? So when we look at generative AI models, these generative AI models, can they actually be limited as to where they should be used? Or it's like the web, where we are very happy with the 20-25% of what we see, and the remaining 74-75% of dark web, we are oblivious to that reality.
Right.
So is that what we're going to see? The dark side of the moon or the dark side of AI continues to remain till a Chandrayaan lands there. I was just...
No, I think typically, right, you look at any software, any application, there's that 80-20 rule, which is what you're talking about, right? Most of the people, 80% of the users will only do 20% of the features. While the rest of those features, those 80%, which is the dark side that you're speaking about, will get used largely by the power users, people who are hackers, people who are, experts, people who are deeply into technology. And I think that's true of every technology. And even the iPhone, for example, I just discovered features that I was not even aware of, right? And I think of myself as perhaps a power user, but clearly I'm not, right? So that will be true of every technology. But you made a very right point that technology is getting way ahead of us. And so there are serious concerns. But there's another aspect with this, what is happening with generative AI, that this current architecture, the current approach, right, where you require massive data centers, massive compute, this is not sustainable. And so there are serious questions on how far can these platforms go. Because today they're burning cash, right? They're raising equity on the promise that these platforms will be very valuable. Similar phenomenon to what we saw in the .com era.
Correct.
Except that now it's happening at a much larger scale, magnitude, order of magnitude is in billions. Earlier it used to be in millions.
Millions.
Right? But the fact remains that this requires massive amount of power. And to keep those data centers powered up, you need cooling. So you need massive amounts of water. So the sustainability is a big question. So if, let's say, there is a school of thought that these models are kind of plateauing, that now to get anything more incrementally better, you need to throw in massive amounts of computing. And so that equation will not work out. And just today I saw that Elon Musk made a very interesting point, an argument that I've been making for some time now, is that ultimately you will have to move this intelligence to the edge. It has to come to the devices. Because this model of having these massive data centers, centralized intelligence, is not scalable, it's not sustainable in the long run. And especially in the Indian context, if you look at where most of our big, bucks for, the bang for the bucks came from technology, it has been on mobile devices, right? Be it UPI, be it with what the Prime Minister calls the JAM Trinity, be it with the way we're consuming video on mobile devices, the lowest data costs and so on. So ultimately, if we are at the scale of 1 billion within India, with all our diversity, all our complexity, if we have to get the benefits of AI, it has to be at the edge. So we need a different architecture, and I think that's where the innovation will have to happen.
But how do you see this? How far or how far behind is India? Is India playing catch up? You said consumers adapt to technology, but we don't have filters. We don't know what this technology, where the origins of this technology is, and what it is going to mine away from you. So the future wars is going to be information. Future wars is going to be data.
That's a serious concern. Absolutely.
And we have seen how society can be manipulated. AI codes and AI models can be written, which can perhaps fuel a certain kind of narrative into the phones and into the mindset, into the psyche. So, and it's quite unnerving. It should be actually part of the national security doctrine of the country. But is that a big threat? Or do you see, as the Prime Minister says, let's look at what good we can bring, especially in the urban areas, especially in rural heartland and connectivity, etc. You see that happening. Which way is the...
I think both are parallel phenomena which will, intersect and commingle, and we'll have to untangle this. There's no escaping that reality. It is clear that the models that are being built in the West come with biases. The models that are being built in China are coming with the Chinese perspective. So hence there is a very strong school of thought which believes that India has to have its own sovereign AI model. And I know that the India AI mission is working with the IITs and some of our leading researchers in putting together such a sovereign model development effort in place. So I think that is going to happen, but that's one path, right? The second path is what I was talking about, where you need a completely different architecture, different innovation approach, and that requires hardware innovation as well.
Yeah.
Traditionally, we've been very good with software, not so much with hardware.
So
So again, there is an effort there. There is this technology called direct-to-mobile broadcasting, or D2M, where potentially you can push large amounts of data to mobile devices without choking up your regular cellular networks. And that could be an enabler for an edge-based AI architecture. In fact, Intel is closely working with one of our startups in India called Sankhya Labs, which is, I think, now part of Tejas Networks, where they're trying to build this architecture, especially for education scenarios. So today, for example, there's a lot of educational content in India, which is getting translated, which is, of course, being developed in one language or two languages, and then translated to multiple languages. Now, if you could do that using edge AI, you can lower the barrier for a large number of rural students from different parts of India. So those kinds of innovations with hardware have to happen. The third is, of course, where it is a question of how do we ensure that these foreign models, with the kind of biases that they're bringing in, how do we guard against that? And for that, there are no easy answers, because if you look at the American approach, it is completely let the platforms innovate. We're not going to intervene. But at the same time, President Trump recently made remarks that if there are models which are bringing in certain political biases, they're going to act against it. So even though their stated position in Paris was that let the platforms do whatever they want, when it comes to their domestic concerns, they're definitely thinking of putting guardrails. So I think that will set a precedent, and if they can do it, why can't we, right? Why should we accept models which bring these biases? And I've already seen this happening in a few cases where if there's a certain untruth mentioned in multiple websites which have certain standing or authority, the models are just taking it for granted, because the models are basically just aggregating all this information and spitting it out back to you. So I'm already seeing that things which are not factually correct 100% are creeping through these models, and that's a risk, and we have to address it.
Because we also have seen AI hallucinating. So this whole hallucination is one part, pulling out the wrong data and trying to push the wrong narrative. So because I'm trying to wrap my head around also the fact that we as a country are a labor-intensive country. So is AI going to render the current stream of people, this current skilled labor, jobless? Are we going to come to a situation, and is this real today in our country, that we have a lot of skilled minds and skilled people who have come out of our current education system, but they don't have jobs? Not that there are not jobs, but those jobs require a certain different kind of skilling or upskilling which is required. So do you see that happening around us today?
It's already happening at different levels. It is not a doomsday scenario yet, but at the same time, we can't just sit back and be complacent. Where you're seeing the immediate impact is those lower end tasks which were earlier being done manually using technology tools, which are getting automated, right? Testing, basic stuff. That's getting impacted. A lot of code generation now is AI based, and that's a big disruptor. When I'll just give you an example. My son, who just finished his first year of engineering, did an internship, and during the internship of 2 months, he created a software tool. I said, "How did you do this? You didn't even learn any of this code." He says, "Now you're able to do it with AI."
Yeah,
So
you don't
AI
need to learn
has
coding. You don't need to learn a language. You just need to do what they're saying, prompt engineering. You need to do the right prompts to get the AI.
Of course, you need some basic know-how so that you know what it is giving you is making sense. But you're probably 3/4 of the distance away, right? So these jobs are definitely getting impacted. There's no denying that. At the same time, I don't think it is going to completely wipe out jobs. It's just that the nature of jobs will change. The kinds of skills required for those jobs will change, and hence it is important that we upskill, like you mentioned. And I think that has to be done on a war footing, where we have to reskill and upskill. But then it is a shifting goalpost, right? Because the technology is evolving so fast.
Yeah, what do I upskill to? Because by the time I learn something, it's already moved on to something else.
I mean, a year back, prompt engineering was supposed to be the greatest thing. Now, because the conversations are so natural, you don't need prompt engineering. You just have to communicate like the way we are doing, and it'll deliver the goods for you, right? So it's a shifting goalpost in that sense. So you will need a very agile, very nimble approach, which probably means that these things can't be top-down, centrally managed efforts. We have to diffuse the technology at various levels, and then empower people locally to figure, what makes best sense for them, and then find those solutions. I think that is perhaps the most effective way for us to deal with this. And I think diffusion is going to be very important. Because lots of times, and there's a good academic study on this as well, that it's not very important for you to be the early innovator, but you can be a fast adopter and diffuse the technology, provided you have put in place the right kinds of enablers for it. So for example, these skilling missions and whatever we're trying to do with skilling has to be decentralized. So that people understand what are the local challenges and solve them locally, rather than trying to have a one-size-fits-all top-down approach, which may be required for the infrastructure, right? Putting in the compute, putting in the cloud infrastructure, so network access, those things perhaps top-down. But which skill, what application, which model, figure that out locally. I think you'll have to marry both these approaches to solve this.
Yeah, but then are we as nimble as we need to be? Or is that a concern area? Because is all right, the Prime Minister's office is thinking of it, certain policy makers are thinking of it, there is an AI mission, but do you see down the line the bureaucracy, the people who are supposed to be implementing AI into the lives or introducing AI into the lives of people, are they doing it? Education wise, do you see the shift away from coding to learning AI rather than AI based learning?
Well, I think both are happening. Top down, of course, what you mentioned with the India AI mission, the Prime Minister vision, of course, all that is there. But also at the local level, what you're already seeing is that people are trying to figure out whatever tools they have access to, whether it is free, whether it is whatever manner, people are trying to solve this. I'm on a few government committees. So one committee that I chair is for science and technology communication, where mostly the proposals that come for these to this committee for approval are from NGOs and schools and colleges from across India. And just the sheer number of proposals which have some element of AI in them is now significantly higher than what it was maybe a year and a half or 2 years earlier. So clearly awareness is there. The aspiration is there because people want to include AI into their whatever that they're trying to do. Where the gap is of course what I said, the computing power and network infrastructure. So the infrastructure issues is where most of them have a significant gap. We need to address that. We need to make available large amounts of this compute power at a reasonable cost, which is what the India AI mission is doing. But still, I think the gap is still quite wide between what is available globally versus what's there in India. And I think this is where our big corporates have to step up.
Do you think we need to jump a generation, do away with the large scale computing capabilities and
that is true.
And run straight to edge AI?
In fact, if you look at the way India has adopted technologies, it has always been through leapfrogs, right? We completely skipped the whole landline era, fixed broadband era. We just jumped to mobile in a big way. And then similarly, from a video standpoint, India has innovated in terms of how people consume video, and they're consuming large amounts of video, right? UPI, again, we completely skipped the credit card era. Credit card diffusion is probably at the top from the elite standpoint, but today every one of your small traders, thelawala, your street corner guy, everyone is using UPI. So our best bet with technology is to find these leapfrogs, where we skip a few generations and diffuse it at the population scale level. No denying that. How quickly can that happen? I think with the right incentives, the government's focus on hardware with semiconductors, incentivizing electronics, hopefully we'll get there. I think there are quite a few promising startups that are working on
what's on the task for you? What is AI for India going to do, or what is there for you over the next, let's say, course of 12 to 24 months? Because beyond that, you and me can't set anything because things are changing so fast.
Absolutely. So one clear area which emerged from our conversations with different startups, was access to data, right? Because a lot of the models that have been built in the West have been built on data which is already on the internet and so on. But data with an Indian context is hard to come by. Most of it is not digital. And many of it is locked up in government departments, universities. People don't want to share data that easily. So we created this effort called Data Dan, where unlike what OpenAI and Meta and the others did, where they very happily perhaps even took your content, copyrighted content, and trained their models, we are saying, can we motivate people to voluntarily make their data available to AI developers? Can we get corporates to open up their data sets where there is no competitive concern, where there is no privacy concern? At least those data sets, if you can make them available to Indian AI developers, then our models can be better. They can reflect the Indian context more accurately. So data is one challenge. Second is ecosystem, right? Even if, let's say, we make a few models which are good, which are sovereign, unless you enable the entire developer system integrator ecosystem, right? These will not get adopted. They will not diffuse to the small businesses, to the corporates, to the local governments, and so on. So that enabling ecosystem has to be there. And one key part of that, such an enabling ecosystem, would be a stack. Right? If you look at the success of UPI, the success of Aadhaar, you built these open APIs, which allowed a whole bunch of applications to be built on top of it and created an entire ecosystem, right? So even for AI, we will have to, create such a open digital public good stack for the Indian models to get adopted and diffused at scale of multiple applications, adopted at a population scale.
So can we expect this in the next 12?
Well, that is the effort, and the government has, I think, done some decent foundational steps already by creating what is called AI Kosh repository, where you can publish data, you can publish your models. What is missing at the moment is what should such a stack look like, what should that API thing look like, and I'm sure that will emerge in the next few months.
Well, interesting, amazing conversation, and this is perhaps some of the setting the context for conversations of the future. So we're going to look beyond the obvious and talk about a generation where, again, perhaps we are going to see far more change in the next 5 to 7 years than what we have seen perhaps in the next last 2 decades. I think things are going to shift very fast.
Which is why when we said, what should we call our organization, we said, let's not limit it to just AI, let's call it DeepTech. Because today it is AI, tomorrow it will be quantum, day after tomorrow it will be something else, right? Because the pace at which, and we can't think in silos. You have to think hardware plus software plus science plus physics, everything coming together.
True. Interesting how the shift is happening even in the West from matter to energy when we talk about quantum. And that's very deeply rooted in our own philosophy or Bharatiya philosophy and Bharatiya knowledge banks because the focus was always energy and not, matter. But that's a conversation for another time, Shashi Shekhar ji. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.